Use File, New Project, create it, put it in the current window, and then I'm just going to set up the Laravel project. So go to Terminal, Laravel New, all right, after I do Laravel New, what's the next thing I got to do? Anybody? Speak up, like I can't hear you. What's the next thing you got to do? For what? Don't I have to make a database? So I'm going to go over to Database, New, File, Database.SQLite. Go over to Database over here. Connect my data source, SQLite. Oops, let me get the path for it so it's easier. It's easier if you just go like and grab the, copy the path, and then, oops. And then you just paste that right in here, and then test the connection. Oh, I need a driver. And successful. So once that's there, I can just close this. And I can see my database schema, but I don't have any tables yet. I got to go over the .env file, and I go into DB connection and SQLite, and then database, paste the path. All right, so it's DB underscore database. And then I can do PHP artisan make auth. And then PHP artisan migrate :refresh. What does migrate refresh do? What's migrate refresh do? It makes the tables. Okay? When you're working with the database, every time you make changes to the database, like you make changes in the migration files, which we'll look at in a minute, or when you do PHP artisan make auth, you have to do PHP artisan migrate refresh, because that'll cause a script to run to look in the migration files, and then it'll update and create the tables inside your database. All right? Inside Heroku, because in the video it shows you how to hook up Heroku and Laravel for the database. Whenever you want to run a Laravel /PHP command on the Heroku server, what you do is you type Heroku run space the name of the command. So if I wanted to run migrate on Heroku, I would do Heroku run space PHP artisan migrate refresh, and then that command, when it was run on Heroku, would tell the app to go create the database tables on the Postgres database that was what Heroku uses. Because on your local, you use the MySQL or the SQLite database, which is just a file. But on Heroku, you're going to use a Postgres database, and then that's a database server, and you have to run the migration commands on it to be able to create the tables whenever you're going to install the app. So every time you make database changes, you got to do PHP artisan migrate refresh. If you make database changes, and like for example, let's say you change your database files on your local, and then you pushed it to Heroku, you have to run PHP artisan migrate refresh on Heroku so that Heroku was updated with the with the database. All right, next, I got routes, and I got web, and I got home, and I got resources and views, and let's get this thing to run locally. So I do run configuration, add Laravel, single instance, press OK, and I should have the little Laravel sign here, unnamed, and press play. And I will have the Laravel homepage fire up. I should be able to go to the register. And I'm logged in. Everything's good. Once I have this, let's go back to this file right here. All right. And you see it says route get /home. That's the URL. That's going to be the relative path. That's the home page. Because you can see when I log in, it says /home at the top. That's what I want this. If I wanted this thing to be home page, I would save it. I'm just changing the name. And then if I refresh this 404, and I type in page, and we would get the page. So we control the name of the URL, the name of the page, with that first parameter in the function. I'm going to go back to home. And then we haven't talked about this, the controller. So let's go take a look at this. So I'm going to go over to app, HTTP controllers, and then we have a file called home controller. And let's take this part, let's take this apart a little bit so you understand what it's doing. I have to blow it up here. All right, so line by line, I'm going to go through this so you know exactly what this is. All right. So in a PHP file, first line, PHP. Got that. This namespace. All right, so we got to talk about this. If you're going to run into this all the time with Laravel, this is going to be one of the most common problems that people have, and they go on Slack, and I can't make it work, blah, 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 blah. This is the number one, maybe number two. In a big program, so Laravel has hundreds of files, maybe a couple thousand files. And just like on your computer, don't you use folders to organize your files on your computers? Right? Make sense? So inside a computer program, no matter what language, this is every language, they use what's called namespaces. And namespaces are just folders for your classes that you have in your program. Does that kind of make a little sense? So just like you have to put your files in folders, you have to put your classes in folders. And those folders that you put your classes in are called namespaces. So namespace equals folder. And you can even see that it's like app, HTTP, controllers. Doesn't that look like a folder path? And so what is that folder path? Let's just look at the directory structure. Hold on. So I can't blow this up anymore, but it's app, HTTP, HTTP, controllers, controllers, and then here's the class name, home controller, and that's the file name is home controller, and here's the class name, home controller, without the .php. Does that connect in your head? You see, namespace app HTTP controllers, app HTTP controllers, home controller, home controller. Okay? It has to be like that. Like, because there's this thing called auto loading. All right? Auto loading. What auto loading does is it says, okay, like, so imagine the program's running. It says, I can't find this class. I can't find this class. Like, file not found. When that error happens, the system automatically calls what's called an autoloader. The autoloader takes the namespace folder path. This is literally a folder path. It takes the folder path, and then the program searches through the folders and looks to see if it can use the namespace to go and get to this file right here, and it can, because it goes app, HTTP controllers, home controller, app, HTTP controllers, home controller. So, does this make a little sense? Okay, so if something says class not found, like can't find it, it's this. It's this. And what will happen is that sometimes, I'm going to send this over here for the online kids. The fix for this is sometimes you need to have a full path, which is with the slash, and sometimes it needs a relative path. So if, just like in directories, if you start it with a /, that's an absolute path. It goes like direct directions. If it starts with no slash, there's no slash, that's a relative path. And sometimes in Laravel, it wants a relative path, and sometimes it wants an absolute path. Generally, if the class or namespace you're dealing with is inside the app folder, stuff that's inside the app folder wants a relative path. If it's not in the app folder, it wants an absolute path. And that's just what I've found is the most common thing. So usually what I do, if I see a class not found, I'll put a slash at the beginning of the namespace. Like I'll put a slash like there, and then run the program and see if that fixes it so that it can find the file. Later, you're going to see specifically where you have to have the slash, and it'll make more sense. But just think that the namespaces are just files and folders. They're just files and folders, but for your classes. Okay? And every language works like this. They may use different delimiters, like they may use different things other than slashes. Like sometimes they use dots. Like Java uses dots. I think Python uses dots. But they're namespaces. Anyway, now here, this command right here in namespace, that defines this folder path. So this is putting the label on this file that it belongs in this namespace. This right here, use, this is saying import. Use means import. Use means use illuminate HTTP request class. So use imports the namespace command that sets it. So namespace sets the namespace, and use imports from another namespace. When we go down here, the first function in the controller, it doesn't always have to be like this, but the constructor, the first thing that happens when this object's created, it's this middleware on, and this is important to know. Okay, so The middleware, what is middleware? Because you end up seeing this, like if you ever read technical documentation or anything outside of here, they talk about middleware all the time. And I was always confused about middleware until I understood it. And it was actually really simple. It's like, my sad story is all my stuff is self-taught. I never sat in a class for nothing. And so I had to just grind it out and figure it out all the time by myself. And so nobody told me anything. And it was a while before I figured out what are they talking about with middleware. Middleware is simple. So you have that route.php file, the web.php, that's here. Here's your controller. Okay? So route, controller. The middleware is in between the route and the controller. So, for example, this right here, this line says if you get a request, if you're going to request the home page, the person has to be authorized. This line tells Laravel that this particular controller, this route, has to have someone who is logged in order for them to see the page. So the middleware, what you use middleware for is if, for example, you have a page here and the request comes in, but you want to do something between whenever the route goes in and the controller is called. Like, for example, in this case, check, is this person logged in? I don't want to put the code inside of here that's like, check if this person's logged in or anything like that, like, because we're dry. We only do it once. So in the whole application, there is one bit of code that checks, is this user logged in? And then this line just calls the method to call the auth function to check that the request has to be authenticated. So watch what happens. So if I take this out, so I'm going to comment this, and I'm going to log myself out. I can go home, and it'll take me to the logged in page. I'm not logged in. I just took the middleware off for authentication. If I go back here and then add it back, I have to log in. Okay, now here's my little speech. The reason why you had to learn that PHP stuff is so you could use this. Because do you know how much code it would take to write to actually have it do the authentication, check the credentials, to allow people to in or out of your application? That's a lot of code. The sign up, registration, the authentication. It's a huge amount of code. So here's the problem that a lot of people have as developers. This is essentially the quintessential problem that you have if you want to get a job in technology. Okay. You go to class, not this class, but other classes. They teach you old stuff. They teach you the fundamental stuff that's like if statements and really basic programming, but they don't show you any frameworks and stuff that's used in the current modern technology. Follow what I'm saying? The problem is that everything is doing things with systems like Laravel, like Python is Flask, and Java is Hibernate and Spring, and there's Rails, and there's like all these frameworks that are just like Laravel. But none of the basic information, very little of the basic information that you learn about if statements and loops and all that stuff applies to the framework knowledge. So you're like, what you have to do on your own, because nobody's going to do this for you, is whatever field you're in, it's the same story. You could be in data science, you're going to learn basic data science, but then outside of here, they're going to do advanced stuff, and you have to bring yourself up to speed. Because there's a gap between what's inside schools and what's inside industry. It's a pretty big gap sometimes. So what happens is that the reason why people use tools like Laravel and frameworks, and you see these frameworks out in industry, is that they do so much work for someone already getting done that you don't have a choice. If you want to get into that game, if you want to get into that industry, you have to bring your skills up beyond what you learn in college and learn the skills and knowledge to be able to use frameworks and toolkits in the programming languages that you work with. Does this make a little sense? All right, so my goal with teaching you this is so that you learn what a framework looks like, how it works, because every single framework, no matter what language you are doing it in, works the exact same way. It's just the syntax of the language is slightly changed. So really what you should look at is learn the basics of the computer programming language or whatever you're trying to do. Then find out, like so my friend back there with R, find out the most popular framework in R, the most popular libraries that are used in whatever area of technology you want to go into, and learn those industry tools that are there, but you're never going to learn the most current industry tools in school because it's just not going to happen. Like I do this in this class because I professionally work, and I do this stuff for a living, and I'm still a professor and everything. And some professors teach really like current stuff. Sometimes it's a little light. Anyway, the next thing is, so I have to log in here, so I'm going to log in. And so I'm going to go down here to index. And so let's index maps to this. So I'm going to go back to the web.php. So look at this. See, route, get, /home, home controller. That's the name of the class. And then see it says at index. Index is right here. Don't you think that that's calling that? That's the index. So web.php, home controller class, index method. Index right here is what pulls that out. So if we wanted to add another page, I would do something like this. So I would go like copy index, put about, go over to web, copy this, /about, oh, these names, they're important because you see how long this is? The name thing right here, you'll use this more later, but basically this becomes a URL, right? Because that's the URL, that's the link you're going to get. Make sense? Well, when I'm making links in my web pages, what I'm actually going to use, and you'll see this later, but I'm going to use these names to refer to these routes. Because what happens is I use the names to refer to the routes. So if I change this URL or I change something about it, it automatically creates the URL for me. So this is how I talk about the route. I don't put the, you're going to see that when I write an A tag, like an A link, I'm not going to write an A link and put in /about. Whenever we get to that, I'm going to put something in there that's going to be called about, and it's going to automatically create the URL. Because later you're going to see that you have to pass in parameters, and you're going to have to pass in data to go from one page to another, and those are complicated URLs to type out because they may have multiple parameters. So you end up referring to them by name. So it's like putting it in a bag. So this is like a bag. and this is the name of the bag, and everything that goes along with it is going to be referred to as that name that's right here. So I'm going to go up here, I'm going to say about, and guess what? View about not found. What we got to do, we got to make an about view. So let's go over here, and then I'll go down to resources, and here's my home, and I'm just going to copy it. And let's just call it, instead of dashboard, I'll call it about. See, about, your about page. Okay, so if somebody says, so first of all, we got MVC. This is what we're going to do. So the controller, what the controller does is the MVC is three-letter acronyms are nice, but it actually is like 4 letters. It's a route, a model, a view, and a control. It's really our MVC because the route is a router. The router figures out, it's like a traffic cop. Go here, go here, go here. Right? The controller, what the controller does is it takes, the route calls the controller figures out what web page to show, or what page to show, or what view to display. Now, the model, what's going to happen with the controller is going to go and grab information from the database, and then it's going to stick it into that web page, and then spit it out. So what the controller does, it looks like this. Route comes in, request comes in, it goes to the route. The route figures out which controller to call and what method to call on the controller. So it calls the class, calls the method. Once it calls the class and method, then the controller, in this case, is just returning back, hey, go to this page. But the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to create a record, and then we're going to see if we can get that record to show up on the web page. So we're going to create a record in the database, and we're going to see if we can get the data out of the database and put the data to go into the web page. So I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to go into my controller, home controller here. Oh, Laravel. All right, so all right, so here's the first step. Okay, watch this. Oh, by the way, I don't remember anything. I remember very little things, like about the coding. Like I always just look up the coding unless I do something all the time, because the most important thing is just to understand the concepts of how everything goes. And then I just use the programming language manual just to look up the syntax and just put the syntax in. So that's the best way to do it, because you end up having to work in different languages and everything, and it's just like, just look it up. You just have to know the vocabulary to ask the question to get the right information to go to the right page in the manual. So here, we're doing a little test. So here, I call the About page. That's going to be the About view. And then here, I did test, arrow, test. So let me call this, and then say, I'll just call it my variable. You can call it anything you want. Doesn't matter. But then when I go over to the About page, so I take this, so whatever you have specified in the first parameter, this piece, is the name of the variable inside the template. Does that sink in a little bit? Does anybody have a question about that? So whatever I call, like I have the name of the page, then I have something I'm going to send into the page, some data that's going to go into the page. I have that variable put like this. So like when I'm putting this in quotes, I'm literally making a variable that's going to be available inside my view. And then this is the content of the variable. This right here, test, and I could say and then when I ran it, you see it puts hello world. Now the next thing we're going to do is on my About page, or actually let's do it, I'm going to rename it. So I'm going to call this my profile page. Let's make a user profile. So I'm going to rename this profile, view profile. I'm going to come back over to web.php, and we're going to call this profile. Because what I want to do is I want to, like we already have one record. We have my user that's signed up into the account. So what I want to do is go retrieve the user, retrieve myself out of the database, get that object that has the data that is me, and I want to print it out and see what it says, and then I want to take it and I want to pass it to the view. So I'm going to come back over the home controller into the profile, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say $user equals let's do this. We'll do it this way first. Okay, so watch what I'm doing here. So in Laravel's documentation, I looked up authentication and authenticated user. So it's retrieving the authenticated user. That's what I looked up. So here, this is You see when it says use, illuminate, support, facade, off? So if I want this to work, I need to make sure that this is imported. Because remember we were talking about namespaces and use. If I want to access properties to the authenticated user, I have to add that namespace I have to add that use command to the top of my file. So I got to put that at the top here. And then I have user, and then I'm going to show you a trick that you're going to use all the time. Remember when you were doing your program and then you had to look inside the variable to see what was happening step by step by step? We do the same thing here. But they have a special command, you can print R, but they have a special thing called DD. DD is a function that's built in. It's called die dump, DD. So DD $user. So what this is going to do is when the program gets to that line of code, it's going to quit, and it's going to dump the information that's inside that variable for whatever it says. So I'm going to save this, and then I'm going to go back to Laravel. Oops. And see, like, I get an error. So, like, here, I forgot to do something. And it's like, don't freak out. It literally tells you what to do as long as you read the error message. It says, method, app, HTTP controllers, home controller. So that would tell you the name of the file. Because remember, the namespace is basically a folder path. And then it's about, I forgot inside here, the method doesn't exist for about because I was changing it and I forgot, I left the about on there. So I got to change that to profile. So I'm going to save this and refresh it. And then what die dump does is it gives you this nice little browsable printout of what that object looks like. Isn't that nicer than printar? So I could go back and say, let's go back to the home controller. And then if I wanted arrow name, that would give me Keith Williams. So let's just look at that again. So I refresh this. Okay, this is important, like, because it's a lot of crap in here. It's like a little overwhelming, but you got to know where to go because then that's like where you find your information. So what I do is I go down to attributes. See attributes pop up, and then anything that's inside this database record is inside attributes. So, and then in order to access an attribute, it's just an arrow. It's the name of the variable, arrow, user. So I could do like $user, arrow ID, $user, arrow name, and it would give me any one of these bits of it. That's how I would access any information that's on that record. So if I wanted to print out the email, I would do $user, arrow, email. And then when I refresh the DD, there's the email. So now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to import another namespace. So I'm going to do use app user. So The app user is the model of the user. So, like when I say model, I mean database record. It's like a table in the database. So, like a user is a user record in the user's table. It's plural. So, if I look at a model called user, that data is stored in a table called users. If I look at a car model, the car is the cars table. So the model is the singular, represents one database record. So this app/user, that is the user model. Because what I want to do is I want to do a query. I want to do a SQL query. We haven't done database. We don't even need no database to do this. So what I do is I'm going to go down here and say $users. Oops, I want to do profile. $users equals user : find. Or sorry, all. And then let's do a DD on users. So I'm going to do a die dump on users. And when I do a die dump on users, it gives me a collection, which is, a collection is basically an array. It's an object, but think about it like an array. They do some special things to it to make it work like an array. And here is my user 0, that's me. And I would be able to go in and see attributes, that's my record. So you have two, basically working with the database, you have two things. You got a model. The model represents one record. You have the collection. The collection represents the query results that would be multiple records. So a collection is a collection of models, and models belong to collections. Does that make sense? We good with this? Now I've got a question for you. We just used the database. We just signed up a guy, used the database, retrieved back records out of the database. Did I write any SQL? Do you think that when you make apps like this, it goes faster than having to write all the PHP code and all the SQL code to retrieve users and get the application set up? Does this make a little sense? So, nobody writes code from scratch anymore. So it's absolutely completely obsolete to just learn like a programming language like Python or PHP. That is worth zippo. It's whatever language you learn, you've got to learn whatever framework or whatever toolkit is used in that language that's real popular. You have to use that, because if you were an employer, would you want to pay somebody to make substandard code and lots of it? Would you want to pay somebody to write out all the PHP code, do all the database queries and all this stuff? That wouldn't be effective, right? So you would only hire somebody that knows how to run a framework. Because if you know how to run a framework, then you're as productive as like 10 developers. All right, so let's say I had this user here, and just let's go and pass users. I'm going to pass users this over to the template. So I want to get this users over to the template. So I go over here, and I'm not going to DD it here. I'm actually going to get rid of this, and then we're going to pass. I'm going to call this users now, and then this is going to be, oops. So you see what I'm doing? I'm retrieving all the users out, load them into the variable, and then I'm taking the variable and throwing it to the view. That's what controllers do. That's a controller. A controller gets data out of the database and gets the display that's being requested, puts them together, and then the view is what's going to generate the HTML. So the view is just the display code, like we can make a table out of this. So I would just say users, and then I'm going to jump back over to my about. And then users. Let's see what happens whenever I do let's see what happens when I just put users here. Oh, profile. We got to change this. So let me just show you that error. So like when I see an error like view profile not found, what do you think I got to do to fix this? Rename about to profile. I mean, that's it. Like those error messages really, they're like, there's only a couple errors that you can actually have. And this is like, it's either class not found, the path isn't there, or you misspelled it. If the view's not found, it's just go into the resources folder and make sure that the view is named whatever you're supposed to name, and it's good. So I'm going to go back over here, and then I'm going to rename the about. And this is going to be profile. And then here, when I do my DD, the page loads, but then it spits out this. This is called JSON, JavaScript object notation. So this spits out JSON inside the view. The DD inside the view works a little differently than inside the controller. If you do a DD in a controller, it prints out that black page with the, you can browse through it. A DD inside the view just shows you the data that's inside the view. Because basically what happens is when that data is passed into the view, all the things are stripped off of it except for just the fields and the records that you would have. It doesn't have all the data that it has in the controller. So in here, I would go over and what I'd look up is blade, template, loop. And then they have, on the blade templates, they have loops and your control structure. And we're going to take this. See, it's for each, just like PHP. And I could do all right, little hint. All right, so in the blade templates, it looks like PHP, but it's not. Pretty close. When I have control structures, the control structures get the at sign, or at for each. And then that looks just like the PHP for each, right? And then it's like paragraph, this is user. And then when I want to print the contents of a variable, like if I want to print the contents of a property in an object, like the user ID, I have to put it in curly braces. So when you want to print text of the data that's coming from the database, the text that you want to print has to be wrapped up in curly braces. So I could say name, because name's also a property there. This user is Keith Williams. Now watch. So if I would, let me sign up another user. So Joe Smith. So then if I would go to profile, see we got Keith Williams and Joe Smith. So what happens is that your MVC, the model is the database. The view is the view that displays it. Controller is what takes the database record and the view, puts them together, and sends them out. I call it making sandwiches. It's like one piece of bread, another piece of bread, put the meat in the middle, sandwich, send it out. It's like making sandwich. All right, so you guys got any questions so far? None? Good? This isn't so hard. The installing it's harder than this. That's the last of it. You have to install this thing called PHP unit, and that's it. And that's the last thing, which is easy. Like PHP unit's is no big deal. It should be one command and it should work. But that's it. I mean, we're going to learn to insert records, delete records. So like, for example, let's say I wanted to get rid of my user account. Not my user account. I want to get rid of Joe Smith. So I want to go and see that I got a So what I'm doing is like I got username and then I want to print the ID because I want to see the user IDs of these users that I made. So I got Keith Williams as user ID 1, Joe Smith as user ID 2. I'm going to show you how to delete a user. So I'll go over the controller and then I would do $user equals user : find 2 and then let's DD on user. So we'll see what the user is that we found. And I'm going to refresh. And so let's look at the attributes. And then ID 2, that's Joe Smith. Let's change Joe Smith's name first. So I would do $user arrow name equals Steve Joe. Doesn't matter. And I would do $user arrow save. And then what happens here is, so $user find ID, that's the ID, 2, user arrow name, that's the name property, Steve Joe, user arrow save, that's going to save the record into the database. So let's run it. Look at the attributes. And the name is changed to Steve Joe. Now let's get rid of Steve Joe. So I'm going to change save to delete. And then I'm going to get rid of the DD. And I'm going to change. I'm going to get what I'm doing is because if I do a DD on something that doesn't exist, it's going to error out. It's just you can't, because I already deleted the record, so it doesn't exist anymore. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to load up all my users. Actually, let me redo this. Do it like this. So I'm going to find Steve Smith. I'm going to load all my users. Then, actually, let me do this. I'll do the delete afterwards. There you go. So find them, rename them, delete them. I don't really need the rename thing anymore, I guess, because I'm just going to get rid of them. So I find them, delete them, look for them. So when I do this, I should have one record, which is Keith Williams. So I should be able to go back to here, and I got one Keith Williams. All right, now let's take a look. I'm going to show you what the SQL looks like. So this is a SQL statement. Here. So what we did to insert a user, we had to write all this stuff out. Insert into users table, field 1, field 2, field 3, value for field 1, value for field 2, value for field 3. We'd have to write all this out for the insert. Then we'd have to write all this out for an update because we'd have to find the record. And we'd have to write, it's just like, it sucks. It's a lot of writing SQL queries. So it's like, what I find, like this is my sort of thing, is what I just showed you with doing the save and calling a delete. I just go and find, get one record, or colon all. Do you think that's easier than writing SQL queries for all those? Yes. It's a lot easier. So, even if you're not making web applications, this is how programming gets done. Like, we don't want to write SQL queries anymore because SQL queries have a tendency to have syntax errors or there's problems in them. You want to carefully write your SQL queries to do them right. But most of the generic ones, like finding records by ID, finding records by a particular name, doing any sort of SQL operations, usually what I do is I go find what's called an ORM, O-R-M. That stands for Object Relational Mapping. ORM, Object Relational Mapping. Every language has an ORM. So probably Python, I know Python does, and R, and every single language you ever heard of has an ORM. And a long time ago, us programmers rebelled, and we said, we hate writing SQL. I don't want to write SQL anymore. I'll do it. I know how to do it. I don't want to do it. Pay the buck. SQL get really long, pay the buck. So when I start learning a new language, once I finish learning the if statements, I learn whatever object relational mapper is used for that language, so that 60 to 70, maybe 80% of all the database queries that I might have to write in an application are done automatically. So like I don't have to do the inserts, I don't have to do the deletes, I don't have to do the finds. I don't have to do alls. I don't have to do search for properties, like a whole bunch. The only types of database queries that I end up writing are very specific ones to do like a specific report, like counting up the number of users that are in the Georgia demographic, like whatever. It's like it'll have to be very complex queries, and then I'll write those by hand. But most of the time, I don't ever have to write SQL queries by hand. I just use the object relational map. Because you don't even, like, so Laravel is a web framework, but like it has an ORM called Doctrine, and it has its own thing. So each language, you don't have to be doing websites. Like if you were just doing data science, you were retrieving records out of places, and you're just working with data a lot, you'd want to get an ORM to go and do that for you, so you don't have to write a bunch of redundant basic SQL queries every time you want to do something. Does that make sense? So once you learn the basic language, then you want to figure out how that ORM works for that language, so you don't have to write all the SQL queries. All right, so I deleted my user. Now let's say I want to make a new type of record. So we got users. Now, by the way, go back to profile. So in this, just to say, you could make this a table. Like you could make a table here and print out record by record by record. You could put whatever kind of HTML you want. I'm just not going to sit here and make a table for you because you can make a table yourself. But this is the idea. It's a for each loop. Take the variable that was specified in the controller, then add, just like PHP, and then make whatever sort of HTML you want. And when you want to print that particular property, you just do it in curly braces. You can put any kind, by the way, you can put any kind of PHP code in curly braces. This is an FYI. Like the curly braces turn blade off and turn PHP on. There are I highly recommend that you read over just the basic blade syntax. So like this right here, I'm not going to do it, but it has a bunch of built-in functions. So here, let's say I have an authenticated user and it has an admin role, then then this user is authenticated. So if this is true, whatever is going to print out here is going to be only shown to logged in users. So like if you wanted to have a menu or a button that someone had to be logged into the site to see it and do it, you would put the button for logged in users right here. But then a guest would be somebody who's not logged in, and then whatever you wanted to have show up, that's where it shows up. So like there's, in the Blade template, it hides and shows items on the page depending on who's logged in. There's a couple different ways to do it. Here's another one. This is useful. I don't want to run this, but like, so for example, one of the things that's like a really good, how to put this, it's not just good, you really kind of need to do it, is, so like let's say you have a page and the page doesn't have any records yet. Somebody logged into their account for the first time, they don't have anything. Well, you wouldn't want to show them a blank page that just has no instructions or nothing in it. Make sense? Like no one has nothing on the page. So what you do is this structure they have here. So if count records equals 1, I have a record. If it's greater than 1, I have multiple records. But you can also do this like else if I don't have any records. So you in the Blade template, what I do is I put an if statement that says if users has records as greater than 1, greater than or equal to 1, then I show the records. If it has no records, then I put a thing up and says there are no records. So it's just called an empty state. So usually on web pages, you need to put an empty state in if there's no records being created. So like when I look at your projects, and you have to make like a project that lists car, and then when I log in for the first time, there are no cars. I don't want to see a blank page. I want to see a link that says, click here to add cars. Because I want you to use the if statement to show, hey, there are no cars in the database. Click this link to go and add cars. Now, let's see, next thing. Whew. All right, so here is, I showed you this for the for each. Let's take a look at the layout app.blade file and just go through and take a look at this a little bit. So remember I told you the names on the routes? See, if I wanted to make a link to my profile page, I would do it like this, href equals route, and then I would put the name of the route here. And then that would generate the actual link for that route. Let's see what else is there. And remember I was saying about how to control whether you show things to logged in users or non-logged in. So for example, here at guest, this is saying show this code for the guest user, the non-logged in user. And then you have at else. This is the code for the logged in user. So if you want to change, like go back and forth between showing like menus for logged in user or menus for signed in user, I mean for non-logged in, that's how you control it. It's at guest. Anything in that block is not going to be shown to a logged in user. So for example, I want to add a profile link. So ID, name, caret, drop down menu, drop down item. So I want to put a link in here whenever the user is logged into that profile page. So the way I do that is this. So I can get rid of this JavaScript stuff. And then I would put profile. Oops. And see, I got profile now in here. So this is the profile, and this is the home page. And then see if I log out, it all goes away. I don't have profile. Now, just to put it in perspective, like a lot of times what I like is, for example, I used to have a job as, I wasn't a programmer for my regular job. I was an instructional designer, so I was doing a totally different job. But then I did this stuff on the side. I was making websites and web applications for other people. You know, give me an idea. Let me tell you the prices of making websites. Give you an idea like what people charge and how much it costs. All right, so little tiny website, like $1,000. That's no code, like no code. Like a WordPress website, to set a WordPress website up for somebody, that's like $1,000. Okay? If I have to do any sort of coding, usually I can charge most people their like a simple thing, like somebody wants a contact form, that's like thousands of dollars to make it work. Like, I'm not doing that for money. When I was doing websites that had multiple functions, had groups and databases and stuff like that, not as a business, but just me, myself, and I would charge $60,000 to $70,000 to do a website that was like people would have discussion groups, and there'd be groups to send emails out to people, like stuff that had real functionality to manage like an organization or something. Those are like $60,000 to $70,000, and that was years ago. Like that was like 7, 8 years ago. Now, I work, and I've done a lot of work with startups, and I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, and I find out what kind of prices they're paying. You want Laravel, you can do $100,000, you can charge like $100,000 for one website to do like somebody's business. Do you kind of see that like if somebody had an idea as an entrepreneur that they needed to do something online, that you could probably with a little effort make that idea with Laravel? You haven't learned enough about it, but you're starting to get the idea that you can generate an off page. The views are just HTML with a little bit of PHP embedded in the views. You don't have to write much database queries. You just have to write a find one, find all. There's a bunch of find commands. There's like some commands for count. There's stuff to do. But these websites cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Just to put it into perspective, I posted it up there, but a Laravel programmer with 5 years experience in New York, they're offering $175,000 for that job. It's crazy money. The reason why it's so much is that unless somebody like me sat down and told you how to do it exactly like this, you can't find out how to do it. So there's such a limited supply of the actual human beings that have the knowledge to work with a framework and to work with all this stuff that it's like almost like black magic Harry Potter stuff. It's like, oh, how did you do that? It's actually kind of easy when someone sits down and like says, do, and lays it out. But if you just faced a computer and you were just trying to learn this on your own, it would be really hard. Does that make real sense? So I show you how to do these things because, for example, do you know that there's like 6,000 Python jobs within 25 miles of here? That's a lot, right? 6,000. That's not in the United States. That's 6,000 in New York City. Okay, Python and the frameworks with Python are almost identical to Laravel. Same stuff. You just have instead of calling it a function, you call it a def. And it has a little bit of difference in a couple things, but same stuff. You could learn Python out and learn a Python framework after you get done with this class in like a couple weeks. And just stick Python on your resume that you're a Python web developer. Go ahead and learn a little JavaScript, pick up it because we don't do JavaScript in this class. It's too much to do PHP and JavaScript, but do that. It makes a big difference in what kind of jobs you're able to do. Because it shows when you put these things on your resume, a technical sophistication that's beyond what the average kid coming out of school has. Because most schools don't teach any, like literally don't teach anything modern. Like go to Rutgers. That's all I gotta say. I'm gonna say Rutgers. No, anybody for Rutgers? Okay. Like, they're really good for liberal arts. But, oh my God. They have this one kid told me at Rutgers that online there's some sort of button. Like they have my NJIT. They have some sort of button that lets you get a higher GPA. Like it's like they let you delete classes that you took that you failed, and like they have all this sort of like these weird procedures to just push people through to get there. And then when I get a Rutgers kid that came over here, like for getting a degree, oh my God, they don't know. So like actually, it turns out that NJIT kids have a real good reputation for knowing their stuff to getting out of here and whenever you go to apply for jobs. And a lot of Fortune 500 companies love them. Like over the past 10 years, for ADP, UPS, FedEx, Johnson & Johnson, like a huge number of their senior engineers that do all of their technology are all my kids that came out. And so you want to get jobs at Fortune 500 companies, go apply for those web developer jobs. Or what the thing is it's not they don't take you as a web developer, they take you as a management trainee. Did I tell you that? Oh, so just a little heads up. The Fortune 500 companies, Chase Bank, all of those companies, they all have trainee programs. For 6 months, they make you go do web development or some sort of software program, even if you're going to go be a manager. If you can't do it, you can't have the job because you're going to have to, during your tour, they do it called rotations, where they'll rotate you through different jobs in the organization. And one of those jobs in the organization is programming. So you have to go through the rotation of programming. If you can't program, they can't even let you in the training program. So even if you're applying to the trainee job, they want to see programming on the trainee application because they're going to stick you in a programming job just for 6 months. Because guess what? Every single company lives and breathes and dies by whether or not their technology works. Make sense? It's like Chase Bank's websites didn't work. Would people go to Chase Bank? So even though Chase Bank's a bank, it's a technology company. Because if their technology doesn't work, their business doesn't work. So they want everybody that comes in the door through business to have really good technical programming skills because they just want you to understand what the whole picture is of what they're going to be doing, and they don't know where they're going to need you a year from now or 2 years from now. You might apply to a trainee job, you don't want to be a programmer, okay, but then if they say, okay, well, you're a trainee, we really like you, we got a job doing that, then that's where you're going. Okay? So these skills are the skills that they use inside their companies to run their IT departments. So everything you learned in this class directly matches up to those companies. Now, the thing that I would tell you, because we don't have time to do everything, we use PHP here because PHP is a real easy language. It has static and dynamic typing where it's easy to type. And Laravel is a good framework because it has a lot of documentation it's easy to understand. But I highly recommend, once you finish this class, go learn some Python. And Python, you'll pick it up real easy after you're done with this. There's no secrets in Python. And then learn a little bit about a little more Python, and then I would learn a little bit of Java. And put Java, Python, Git, frameworks, MVC, object-oriented design patterns on your resume, and see what happens. All right. Now, don't tell them you're an expert, by the way. Just tell them you read about it. You read about it. You're not an expert. You're not, but it's at least a good track where you got to go. All right. So All right, what I want to do now is I just want to show you a couple things. So we're going to do that DD thing, the die dump. And the DD, we're going to do dollar users arrow count. So what this is going to do is it's going to take the collection of users and it's going to count the number of records that's in it. So we're going to refresh the screen. So this is the DD with the black screen. That's just one, because there's one user in the database. The next thing is Laravel So remember, it's all hard to see. We're not going to go through all of these, but I just want to show you that they exist. Remember in PHP, I showed you that page that had all the array functions? So the equivalent in Laravel is all of the collection functions. So like sorted descending, sort the keys, you can combine two collections, you can take the average of a field, you can give it all the records in the collection, the count, like I just used count for a collection. So this page, collections, has all the methods, like after you retrieve data from the database, these are all the methods that you can call to do something with that data after. Now, so we got users, all, we did the find. Let's do all right, so I showed you how to do the all method. Like I showed you, okay, the two are find, okay, gets like, you put whatever the ID is you want. So like find record 1, find record 2, find record 3. And then you have find colon or the name of the object, like users colon all. And then here's another style. Like, so in SQL queries, they have what's called a where clause, and the where restricts what records are going to be there. So in this case, like for example, at flight, so this is the model, where this is a field name, so active equals 1, order by, name, sort descending, take 10 records, and get me this information. So that's a SQL query, but a more fancy SQL query. That's with the condition of the where it has to return. So for example, I could take this and then So what I'm doing is I'm just changing this query around. Because what I'm saying is, get me a user where the ID is 1, order it by name, descending, and then take 10 records. We only have 1 record. I just want to show you that the query works with the where clause. See, it comes back the same because we only have 1 record. Let's say we wanted to make a bunch of records. Like, we need a bunch of records for testing. So this is how we would do this. So inside the database folder is a thing called seeds. All right, I want you to make sure you see this because you're going to end up doing this. So I'm going to uncomment this line that's already built into there, and then I got to run an artisan command. PHP Laravel seeds. So they have a section on, like, if you haven't noticed yet, all you have to do is just type Laravel collection, Laravel seeds, Laravel template. Like, their documentation's good. Like, it tells, like, there's nothing that you're doing that's not already been done in this documentation. Like, I took this documentation and used it to make your project, like that you end up doing. So all the information is inside these. So I want to make a seed. So here, what is a seed? Okay, and seed, like, again, seeds are like every framework has this. This isn't specific to Laravel. But a seed, what that does is it's going to be a way for you to generate records on demand. Because, like, if you're working with data, you know, you need more than 1 user. It's a pain in the butt to keep having to sign people up. I want to have a site that I have 1,000 users to check and see what happens when I have 1,000 users. So the seed is how you automatically generate fake people or fake users or fake anything. I can generate any kind of fake data. So we're going to start off with doing regular users. And then what we're going to do is use it like this. So I'm going to I just wanted to see if we got it. So there's an artisan command. And the first one we're going to do is PHP artisan make seeder user table seeder. So I'm going to go over to the terminal. Then I generate the seeder. That's the user table seeder. Then I come down here and it tells they show you a couple different ways to make seeders, but we're going to use what's called a model factory. And then we just paste that in there. And let's take a look at what's going to happen. And we don't want this yet. So I'm going to explain what this line is. All right, it says factory. Remember, we talked about factories. App/user. So factory makes objects. The factory is going to make these objects. The first parameter right here says what object are you going to make? We're going to make app user. That's the namespace. And then comma 50. This is what it says how many users we're going to make. So this is going to say make me 50 users, create them, and then pass them into here. But I commented this line out because we haven't made a new model. Like, we haven't made another. We're just using the built-in user model. We don't have a post model. But a lot of times, for example, I might want to generate 50 users and then add 50 users to a blog post. So each user would get a blog post. So I'd be generating users and blog posts with this line, but I commented that out because I don't want to generate, I don't have that yet. So what I do now is I do PHP artisan migrate colon refresh dash dash seed. So when I run that command, I can refresh my database so we can see what happened. You see, we got a bunch of fake users now. So now whenever I go back to my program, and remember this is back to the code real quick. You see what we're doing is user where ID equals 1. Let's take this out and then bring this one back. So we're going to count up all our users. Why am I? It's going to cause a problem. So see, we got 50. And if we wanted more, we would just go to the table seeder and we could make 500. And so now you got 500 users. Right? What'd you say? The database. It's whatever you want. I mean, you can sort it by name. You can sort it because, like, you can sort by name. You could filter by user ID. Every SQL command to like say how you want to order them, or how you want to like look for a particular person's name, or you could do greater than or less than, like look for users that have a user ID less than 30. So now the last thing that I'm going to show you is we're going to talk a little bit about database. It's out of curiosity, did you guys take a database class yet? I need to know this. Like, how many of you know about SQL databases? Most. Okay. Okay. So one of the things is when you're sitting around your computer, you're yelling at the computer because you don't know what you're doing, you have to realize that not everybody doesn't know anything. Okay, in fact, probably most of you know at least, like, there was like 75% knew about databases. Okay? So, on basic SQL stands for Structured Query Language. SQL is called a relational database. A relational database, what that does, and this isn't a database class, you're going to take your own database class. But the gist of it is, you have a record like user, that's the user, and then let's say we have blog posts. You ever use WordPress to make a blog post or something? Right. So that user has to have that blog post related to them. That's why it's called a relational database. So we have to have a connection between the user and the blog post or some content that they're making, so that whenever you log in, you could do a query like, show me all the blog posts that the logged in user has made. Does that make a little sense? So just imagine we usually have to have one record, which is like a parent record, and then that record has to be related to another record. So it's like users, cars, users, blog posts, users, pets, like whatever. It's like something, one record is related to another, and there will be one table to store users, and there will be another table to store pets, or whatever else it is, and then you have to relate those two together. Now, we're going to do a really simple relationship where we just have a one-to-many relationship. In a database, there's three types of relationships. There's one-to-one, one-to-many, and many-to-many. So we're not going to do one-to-one. We're going to do one-to-many right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it so that we have 50 users and 50 blog posts per user. Well, 50 users and one blog post per user. So that line I commented out that like attaches the blog post to the user, we're going to make that one work, but I'm going to show you how that works so you can see, kind of answering your question, where does the database get the information? Where is this information stored? So what I do is I go to PHP Storm, and we're going to make posts. So I'm going to make, the command that I have to type in is PHP artisan make model posts dash MCR. All right, and that's important to do the MCR. I know it's hard, I can't make this part any bigger, but it's PHP artisan make model post dash MCR. Okay, that MCR is important. If you don't do that, you kind of jack yourself up and you end up having problems. Like, it's not problems, but it's like a lot more work to fix it. So I'm going to make posts, and when I put the dash MCR, that's an acronym. So it means make a migration. The migration goes to the database table. The C is the controller. That's the controller file that we were just working in. Like, we have home controller. Now we're going to have a posts controller. And then the R stands for resource. So a resource controller is a controller that can bread. Did we talk about bread? Okay. Bread is an acronym. Okay. Bread stands for browse, retrieve, edit, add, and delete. Okay. So in an application, most of the time, like, you have to bread. Because you have to browse for the records, like a list of records, like a table of records. Don't you click on the record? That's browse, retrieve. So you retrieve the record. Then edit. E. Don't you edit the record? So that's the E. Don't you have to add records? That's the A. And don't you delete records? That's the D. So bread. It's just an acronym that means list them, retrieve them, edit them, add them, delete them. Make sense? Bread. So the R in the MCR stands for bread, resource. So M makes a migration, C makes the controller, and R makes the controller have all the methods, like all the parts, to do bread. Because what I just did here was I go up to here in my controllers. Now I got a post controller. It doesn't fill out all the, it just makes the methods. So like index, that's the browse. Create, that's the add. That's the form that's going to be there. The store is how you store a record. Show is retrieve a record. Edits, how you edit a record. Updates, how you store the update. Like, we're going to do these, but like, it sets it all up. Like, it wrote all the code except for filling in the details of exactly how to do it, but it gave you all the functions names. And it also made, inside the database folder, it also made the migrations. And see, now we have a post table. We have a migration for posts. And so in the post migration, you see I got an ID field and timestamps. Now, what I want to do now is I want to just run my PHP artisan migrate. And then if I refresh my database over here, I'll have a table now for posts inside the database based on this file right here. So the next thing that I'm going to do is go back to my Laravel documentation. And there's this section for relationships. And they have all the database relationships. One-to-one, one-to-many, and they give the examples of how you do them. So I'm going to go to one-to-many. And so it just says a one-to-many relationship is used to define relationships where a single model owns any amount of other models. For example, a blog post may have an infinite number of comments. Like all eloquent relationships, one-to-many relationships are defined by placing a function on your eloquent model. So right now, I'm going to go and take this little bit of code here. And I got to go over to my user model because users are going to have posts. And I got to rename this posts and then app posts. So it's like so I say post is the method name, and then return has many app posts. So like literally it's like has many posts. So this is the namespace. Sometimes you see the namespaces specified without the quotes, and sometimes you see them done like this. They're actually, I can do it something like this. I could do app posts class. That'll work, like without the quotes. But I'll just keep it like this. And then in order for my posts to have, in order for posts to be owned by a user, I have to add a field to posts to store the user ID for the record. Does this make a little sense? It's like the posts needs a new field. So I'm going to come down to the migration for posts, and I'm going to say $table integer user underscore ID and that goes and puts the user, that's going to put the user ID field on the post so that the post connects to the user. So that's how they're going to, it's like imagine lines getting drawn between those two. So then when I edit the database, what do I got to do now? PHP artisan migrate. because then every time I edited a field, I got to run the migrate so that it updates the database, so that now when I look inside of posts, it has the user ID field here. All right, now the next thing I'm going to want to do is I'm going over to the factories folder. Now the factories folder, I want to see if they have an artisan command to make a factory, but I don't think they do. Oh, yeah, we got it. There we go. So I'm going down the terminal, and the command's PHP artisan make factory post factory. So now we got in here, we got a post factory, and it returns the model, and there's nothing in it, but like I look at a user factory, they have, you'll learn this in the video more, but there's a special library, and this is really useful to know this, not just for PHP, but for other things. I think every language has this thing called Faker. That's like the name of the library. And what Faker does is it generates fake data. So for example, but like not just random fake data, I mean sort of random, but it'll be like, give me some names, give me email addresses, give me states, give me countries, give me, like, it'll just randomize specific types of data. Like, give me website addresses, and it'll just give you random website addresses. Like, you can go to this website for PHP Faker. And then, like, they just have all sorts of different, like date and time data, address data, people's names, text, internet references, images, barcodes, lorem ipsum, all sorts of variations. So the reason why I say this is, like, if you have to do a project and you need data for the project, sometimes you just generate fake data, and that's becomes the data that you have in the project. Like if I was using Python or R or other things, I would look to see if there was a library like Faker that would generate fake data that was specific, not just random stuff. But I want to get fake names, fake addresses, fake numbers. Like this has stuff where you can like set a limit and a max for the numbers that are going to get generated, or you can generate like odd, even, odd, true, false, and just put fake data. Because a lot of times you need the fake data to run to check that your calculations are going to be accurate, and you don't have access to the original data that you're going to want to use. Because like think about it this way. If you were making a system to collect data that had never been collected before, you wouldn't have any example data to test your system with. So in order to get example data to test your system, then you would want to use Faker. And just as a tip, throw it in the back of your mind, there's a command with Faker that will tell it to always generate the same data set. So that, like, for example, if you had checked your calculations against a specific set of data, it will generate the same exact fake data again, so you don't mess up your calculations once you check that this is the accurate information. All right, so here, or like, for instance, biased. Oh, by the way, one of the things that's kind of cool to do, I think this is a little project, is to work out a way so that whenever you generate a random set of numbers, that you generate it to a normal distribution. So like you come up with a way to generate a set of numbers. That set of numbers is going to form a normal distribution when you do the standard deviation on it, so you can see the bell-shaped curve in the numbers that you're generating. All right, so my post factory, I go to post factory. The first thing I got to do is I got to do app/posts because it wants to know where am I getting my post, like what model, what factory am I doing. The post factory would want to say app post because posts is the model that I'm going to want to have for this. Then I'm going to go down to database seeder or user seeder, and I'm going to uncomment this. We're probably going to get an error, but we'll fix the error. I think I might have done this right, but I might have missed a step. So what happens in this is that so we're going to generate 500 users, create them, each user pass them in. So the U right here, that's the user that has just been generated. One user. One user comes down here. The user model has the post method. I added that post method here. And it's going to save. And it's going to be factory post make. So this is going to make the record from the factory. And it's going to make a sandwich. But I think I missed something, so just give me a second. I'm going to have to run this. All right, so I got an error. See, here we go. So class app post not found. Now, there's a couple things I'm going to try. First thing I'm going to try to solve this error. There's a command. It's composer dump -autoload. Sometimes this works. This is like, did you ever have an old piece of electronics and you hit it to try to make it work? And then that's that. Like composer dump -autoload, just to understand what that command is Laravel caches. It saves all of your classes. And sometimes when you add a new class, it forgets to know where that is. So you have to dump the cache of all your classes and it has to rebuild the class. See, we just added the post factory. It doesn't know about the post factory. If dump -autoload doesn't work, usually the next step is to put the slash in front of the app like we were talking about with the namespaces. So first I'm going to do composer dump -autoload. Now I'm going to try to run it again. I don't think it's going to work, but we'll go ahead. And then now we got here. So app post still not found. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here to factory. The post factory, and I'm going to put a slash here. I'm going to save this and see what happens. So it's still looking for posts somewhere. So I would, whoops, it could be a slash missing here. Ugh, where's my... Oh, I called it posts. My bad. My bad. I'm refactoring. I want to change the name to post. Then I got to check inside here because we got to make sure it renamed it to here. And now let's do a composer dump -autoload. Yeah, we're winning. So generally, the errors you get are like the class isn't found. You got to check, is the name right? Like is the slash in front. Like, it's just these little things to check whether or not you got the slash on the thing. Because, okay, look, I'm going to tell you straight up, Laravel's not broken. Like, this is not, I guarantee you, this is not broken. Like, Laravel has like millions of downloads. Like, it's used all over the place. It has been beat up. Like, people use this every day. So there's no reason Laravel's ever broken. It's like, it's not me, it's you. So, but the errors are really simple. Once you have the errors, you're just going to get used to. They're always the same thing. It's like the name of the thing wasn't right. It's never, what you're going to notice, you're not really hardly ever writing any logical code. Like, you're not writing a lot of if statements. You're not writing a lot of that. You're just like, it's like typing commands. Just go get me that model. Check the model. And it's very standardized how it gets done. It's like, and that's what places want, because that's why you, whenever, so for example, when you put Laravel on your resume and you send it to somebody and that company happens to use Laravel, they know that you're like a Laravel mechanic and that they don't have much training to have to give you. They could just put you to work doing that and you can get on your way. And as long as you come to work and everything, you're probably doing it right. So what did this do? So let's go and look inside the database to see, did we get posts? So yeah, we did. So we got 50 posts or 500 posts because every user got one post. Now let's put, posts have two fields usually. They have a title and a body. So let's throw a title and a body on it. So I would go over to the migration. And then I would do dollar table, arrow, text, title, dollar table, text, body. What do I run? PHP artisan refresh. But it's gonna barf now. And you're going to get an error. I know you can't see it. I'll read it to you. It says, integrity constraint violation 19, not null, constraint failed, post.title. And you're like, oh my God, what is that? So it just means that null means empty. It just means this thing cannot be null. Like, the title doesn't have a default. We haven't set it. It can't be null. So it's just telling you can't have an empty title when it tries to create a post. So the way I fix it is I have to go to the faker. I go to faker and I'm going to fake some stuff. So I'm going to fake a title and I'm going to fake a body for the post. So I go over to my post factory and then I grab my user factory because it kind of has some stuff to get set up. And I just need to start with the first one. I'll just use name. So then I go title, and then I'm going to go over to the Faker website. And so I go to the Faker website, and I just look up, okay, probably, let's get some lorem ipsum text. And we're going to get a sentence. And then I'm going to get a body. So what I'm doing is I'm just saying I want to get a fake title and I want to get a fake body, and now I'm going to run it again and see what happens. So it's seeded. Oops. And then I'm going to go and just check my hello? Yeah. $70. Okay. I got to go. I'm teaching classes right now. All right. So I'm allowed to take phone calls. You can't. So I refreshed it. It's got a title and a body. And then now we got a fake title and we got a fake body. So now we got fake data. So, and like user ID is here, but I might want to move user ID over there. So all I do is just go over to my migration for posts, and then I might just move the user ID field to here and just run the migrations again. And that sorts that out. Now what's this, which is kind of cool. So we're going to go back to our home page. I'm going to go back to home controller. So in my home controller, we got users, but let's do it differently this time. Let's do $user equals auth. What was that? Authentication. And then we're going to do a DD on user arrow posts. So on my home page, I'm going to print out all my posts. So what happened was basically this right here contains the post that I made. So think about this. So here, $user equals auth : user. Auth : user, what do you think that does? Anybody? Speak up. It's the authenticated user. It's the person who's logged into the site. So I load the person that's logged into the site into this variable. Then I do user arrow posts, and that gets me my posts. That's tight. Like that's really nice to like just you make some posts, and then you can just you can grab the logged in user, and then just say who that user, show me the posts or so many records that user had created, and you get the records that you created, we could load them in like this. So I could do $posts equals $users arrow posts. And I'm going to explain this a little bit in a second here, make sure it works. Okay. So, when I first saw this made me feel uncomfortable because I never saw anything like this before. If I want to get the posts, I have to do it like this. I have to do $user arrow posts, but no parentheses. If I do it like this, it will load all of the posts into here, and then this becomes a collection of posts, and then I can count them, I can sort them, I can do whatever I want. If I do it like this, so look, you see this is the results of that. See, it's a collection, it has attributes, so we can look at attributes, we can see what the attributes are, we can see that the title is Architecto, and then we got a body, that's the body. Let me just put the parentheses in front of it and see how this changes. Totally messed up. Doesn't work. It like gives you all this other information. It doesn't tell you anything about doesn't do anything for you. So the moral of the story, I'll put the comment in here. You need and so what we would do now, so I'm going to take the DD off posts. I'm going to then take posts and put posts down here. And then this is my profile page. So I'm going to go down my profile blade. Going to be $posts as post, and change these two. And we can do title, body. Let's make this a heading. Let's see what this looks like. So basically what I'm looking for is, so I'm going to put a heading 1 tag around the post title, and I'm going to put the post body below it, because the heading 1 tag is going to force the carriage return, but to go to a new line. And let's see what it looks like. So then I'm going to go I got to fix this. I think it wants it like this. So I just had to move it between because it was printing the HTML. It wasn't rendering it, so I just had to move the HTML tags outside of the curly braces. There we go. So then there's the title, there's the body for the post. All right, so here's what we're going to do. I just dumped a whole lot of stuff in. I'm going to give you the code. What I want you to do is take the code that I'm going to give you, and then come in next week and basically be able to do what we did in class. You can have a seed, you can seed posts, you can relate a post to a user, you can get all this stuff functioning, and you can see how the database works and just get used to using the stuff that we did today. Then next week what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to do the forms. Like to put the insert form, the update form, the delete form, how to do, so it's not just using the seeds, but you're going to actually do the web forms to create the post and create the record. Okay? But you have to come in next week and be totally cool with doing seeds, displaying some, like seeing how you can pass the data from the controller into the template, making pages. Basically, that's good. The seed, that should be okay. All right, and then let me show you how to run my program. Because you're going to get my program and you're going to want to run this program on your own. So I'm going to do this from scratch. I'm going to do a new Laravel project. I'm going to push this up. I'm going to show you step by step how you get my program to run on yours. So I go and go up to my GitHub and say IS601 CD. So create the repo. I'm going to copy this. VCF. I got to put in my git ignore for my .idea stuff. Hold on. All right, so it's pushed up. Now, I'll refresh it. I'm going to get the link. I'll put the link in Slack. Now, once I do this, this is how I would start from scratch. So I'm going to close it down. Go to checkout from version control, get, paste the link, click clone, yes. Okay, this is where the steps come in. So I go to view, or go just to terminal. I got to do composer, install. And that's going to go and start installing all the modules. Then I got to go over to my .env, and I got to copy the .env or go to refactor. Where's refactor? Copy it and just make it .env. Then I go up to database, add the database SQLite file, copy the path, go over to the .env file, SQLite, database, PHP artisan, migrate, refresh, -- seed. It should all fire up. Then add the configuration. The application key is not set. I love that. PHP artisan make key. Or sorry, generate. What? Oh wait, key, it's key generate. Oh, I gotta stop the server. There we go. So just if you want to write it down, I'll put it in Slack, but it's 1, clone, 2, composer, install, 3, .env, rename, 4, make database .sqlite, 5, put the path and change .env file for the database, and then 6, PHP artisan key generate, PHP artisan migrate, refresh, and then I'll put this in the README. So we'll just go back to PHP Storm, and then it's already got a README. I think it's got a README. No, there's no README, so let's put a README in. There you go. So that should be all the code. That's the whole thing. All you got to do is come in, because here's the thing. Go home and look at what that project 2 is going to do. That project 2 sucks. Okay, project 2, there's a reason why I'm giving you the code. It's a lot of work. If you are not on top of what I'm telling you to do, you're 100% not having enough time to get project 2 done. Okay? So, you can't just be like, this is kind of an easy week. You might think about it. I just gave you the code that you need to have for next week, right? But you got to understand that. You got to really understand exactly what was going on there. Be able to recreate that and do that, because next week we're going to do some forms. Then we're going to do the seed. We did the seeding because that's part of it. Then we're going to do the unit testing. And then we're going to put all that together over the next 2 weeks. And then like 4 weeks from now, project's going to be due. I'm going to give you literally, like from the last class that we covered, the last thing that's going to be in that project, you'll have 1 week to do it. You won't have any like wiggle room. We're not having, like, I'm going to shut the Slack off the weekend is due. Don't do that. Like, it's unfair. Like, listen, it's really unfair to me. It's unfair to the tutors to be free, to not do any work, then come in like the weekend that it's due, and then have a hot mess over the weekend that you're having a nightmare because you can't get the stuff done, and you're blowing up the Slack and nagging. You don't want to hear it. Like, you have weeks to prepare to do that project. It is impossible to do that project in a relatively short amount of time. Just the last thing, and then you can go. Let's just take a look at what that project entails, just real quick. So let's go down the list. You got to make a new Laravel site. We got that so far. We can generate the authentication, make off. Okay, create a database seed that can search 50 users. Can we do this? Yes, we can do this. We create a new model and add 3 properties. Make model in year. We could do this. We did a post and we added a title and a description, but we could just add make model and year. So you could do this. Create a factory for cars that sets the make, model, and field to either Ford, Honda, or Toyota. You could work on that. You could get that done because of that project. That project is just inside Faker. It has an option which it allows you to set 3 different options, and it'll randomly assign one of those 3 fields to it. But you got to research the Faker and see that. Like, Faker's pretty cool. Like, you guys doing data science stuff, you need to know how Faker works, because I guarantee you need fake data. Generate 50 cars, we can generate 50 posts. Now, so I would try to bang out all 6 of these right now. I would like start my project, because by next week you should be able to get down to number 6. Okay, make sense? Now, we don't do this. We haven't done the controller stuff right here. We've done controllers, and we did an about page, and this is kind of some stuff down here you could probably get done. The only thing you can't do is do a form. Forms are complicated, not complicated, but you just let me show you how to do it, because it's like a pain in the butt. So that would be next week, and then we're going to start on these unit tests, and then look. There's like 15 separate unit tests that have to be done. These aren't that bad. They look like a lot. It's not that bad. But if you come in 2 weeks, when you have like this, like probably 3 weeks from now, if in 3 weeks you start doing this on the weekend and you're blowing up the Slack, I'm going to put you on the ignore because I'm not having it. Okay? Okay. Did you see how the first project went, where you kind of thought you might have gotten it done in a reasonable amount of time, and then it was like harder than you thought it was going to be, and then it dragged out? That sound a little bit familiar? Okay, we're not having that again. I'm not taking it 7 days late. As soon as it's due, it's due. Okay, so just work through now, get this stuff done, because you can get the first 6 things done of the project finished up. You can literally just take what I gave you and start renaming stuff so that you can have cars instead of posts. You can do that, you can get that done. That's the first 6 things. Then the next 6 or 7 things we're going to do next week. And then these unit tests aren't that hard. They're actually pretty easy to do. It's not hard at all. And then you'll bang it out and you'll be done. But if you come in here like Friday before things due and you're like, can I get some help? Did I warn you? No, we're not having Benit staying up all night long. On Friday night, Benit wants to go out. She doesn't want to be answering questions on Slack. Just joking. All right, so you're all done. Go home. And then just work on this, bring it in next week, because then I'll show you how to finish the project.